Welcome to Rewatch and Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other, and today's episode is Bleach Soul Society The Sneak Entry Arc, Episode 24, Assemble the Gotai 13. The episode in a nutshell is a brief reminder of what happened in this episode. So basically, the episode picks up with Ichigo, Inoue, Ishida, and Sato um, basically continuing to have conversation with Kukaku Shiba, who has told them that the way that they are going to be entering the Saratai is through basically being shot out of a fireworks launcher in a spirit-powered cannonball to break through the barrier that surrounds the Saratai, allowing them to go in and try to save Rukia. And because Ichigo came by his powers in a roundabout way, he doesn't actually know how to cast Kido or spells, or control his spirit energy, and so at first he is unable to create the cannonball that will lead them to enter, and he refuses to learn from Ganju basically on principle. So Kukaku's twin sort of henchmen, they end up trying to teach him, but they aren't very good teachers as they just keep telling him he's grunting wrong. But slowly over the training session, Inoue, Sato, and Ishida manage to make it. And in the end, Ganju, basically when Ichigo is left alone while the others go to dinner, asks him if Rukia is really so special that he has to risk his life to save her. And Ichigo says that she isn't, but that he owes her his and his family's lives from when she had saved them way back in episode 1, and that she had given him her powers in order to save them, and now she's been arrested for it and is going to be put to death, and he's not going to be a worthless individual who just sits on the sidelines while someone who helped him so much and that he still owes a debt to is executed basically because of the actions she took that now led him to owing her a debt. And so this sort of softens Ganju to him enough that Ganju lets him in on his trick for creating it, the little sphere of spirit power, and he manages to create it, though he is unstable because he has so much spiritual energy. At first, he doesn't solidify it properly, so Kukaku has to yell at him for that. Then he does it, and he decides he's going to celebrate because he managed to do it, except that makes him lose his concentration, and it breaks the barrier around him, which basically makes it explode, which Kukaku had warned them would happen if they didn't keep up their concentration. So even though it's a celebration that he did it, well, it didn't turn out great. And then the other portion of the episode was basically the lieutenants of the 13 squads that are in this Shinigami squads gathering in a room together to basically talk about why they've been gathered in a room together. And then um the 13 captains, less one who is apparently on sick leave again, which apparently happens frequently, um, have all gathered as well, and Gin is the last one to arrive and gets into a bit of a argument with some of the others about how he let the Roka go and didn't make sure that they were dead, which as a captain he'd be fully able to do, and they're demanding answers. However, as they're demanding answers from him, the alerts start going off that the Saratai has been breached and there are intruders, and so that presumably will be cutting the meeting short. We then move over and see Rukia looking out the window saying Ichigo, and that is how this episode ends. So now that we've been reminded briefly about what happened, it's time to rank the episode, and we'll rank the episode on our mostly objective ranking list, which is mostly objective because while emotion doesn't play a part, bias and judgment still can, and then the personal ranking, which is opinion, emotion, and entertainment value based. So we'll start with our mostly objective rank values, and there were a lot, like a lot of multi-arc supporting character introductions in this episode, and each of them are worth 3. And it's almost not even worth ranking here because like it's a guaranteed outcome, but I'll still list off the names. So we started with, of course, the Lieutenants Gathering, and while we have met Renji before, the other 3 were completely new, and that is Tetsuzaemon Aiba, Momo Hinamori, and Rangiku Matsumoto, who have gathered on the lieutenant's side, and it is Rangiku Matsumoto who basically tells them that it's unlikely the other lieutenants are going to make it within a reasonable amount of time, as typically they'll be scattered throughout Soul Society doing their jobs, and that's why there's only 4 of them gathered so far. Then we have all of the captains who are present at the meeting. So there's Genryusai Shigekuni Yamamoto, who is basically first squad captain and overall commander of all 13 squads, the leader of leaders, so to speak. Then there was Sui Feng, um, Retsu Unohana, Sajin Konomura, Shunsui Kyoraku, Kaname Tosen, Toshiro Hitsugaya, Kenpachi Zaraki, and then Meiri Kurotsuchi. In addition, of course, to the ones that we've already met, like Aizen, Byakuya, and Gin. But again, like so many character introductions, all worth 3 points. Then we also had our multi-arc supporting character development, where we learned that Kukaku and Ganju, the reason that they don't like Shinigami or have this sort of hatred towards them is that their brother really loved Shinigami, so much so that he decided to become one, and then he ended up dying, and the siblings blame the Shinigami, like the other death gods, for their brother's death, which leads to Ganju's outright hatred. However, Kukaku, because she knows that if her brother was alive, he would want them to help Ichigo and his friends. That is why she is choosing to do so, even though she does think like Shinigami are crappy, and Ichigo being one is also therefore by association crappy. And that's another 3 points. And then worth 4 points total, we have our multi-arc main character growth. And this does apply to all of the main characters. Shadow, Inoue, Ishida, and Ichigo are all learning how to use their spirit power to create the shell that will become the cannonball they get launched in to break through the barrier of the Seratai, or Court of Pure Souls, as it would be. And then we also get the world building aspect worth another 4 points, which is, of course, that the gate that surrounds the Seratai is actually made of a very special but rare stone that's only found in Soul Society, which in the translation in the subtitles I was reading was translated as the Bloodthirst Stone, and that this Bloodthirst Stone basically resists spiritual energy, so it not only is a physical barrier which spirit power cannot break through, but it also um, manifests a spherical barrier that surrounds the entire Seratai, preventing people from being able to get into it. And in addition to basically stopping spirit power, it also emits waves that can actually disrupt spirit power. And these cannonballs that Kukaku made were invented by her specifically to get around that barrier, and specifically that stone. And that is why it is going to be able to allow them to penetrate that barrier and land in the Saratai so that they can go and save Rukia. And then the only negative of the episode was the fact that it very much was more of a setup episode, as everything that they were doing was preparing for the main plot, which is, of course, entering the Saratai and saving Rukia. And then, of course, the various meetings, but the meetings are just getting started and not a lot was discussed in them. So, very much set up. And that's only -1 point. We're so far above 10, it doesn't even really matter. So, yes, this is a 10 out of 10, mostly objective, ranked episode. Which brings our list so far for this arc on our mostly objective ranking. Brief reminder, when more than one episode has the same score on our mostly objective, it's just ranked in episode order. Which brings us to, in first, Enter the World of the Shinigami, The Man Who Hates Shinigami, Assemble the Gotai 13, and then in fourth, 14 Days Before Rukia's Execution. So for my personal ranking, I do think when Ichigo is training with the sphere, he's obviously not very good at it, and they keep saying that he has no talent for it, whereas the others seem to get it really quickly. And I feel like they had a bit of an advantage in learning it because their gifts come from controlling their spiritual power. So they already have that kind of down from learning how to use their powers. They've also kind of learned how to control their spiritual power. So now it's just a matter of like manifesting that outside into like the ball, which they're able to do pretty easily. Whereas Ichigo, his powers are different because he actually became a Shinigami. And so that power is more like instinctual or innate in the species, I guess, that he is. Versus, so he hasn't had to learn to use his spiritual power at all. And we have seen in the past where in a desperate situation when they were facing like the Menos Grande, that he's managed to release obscene amounts of power, but that he had no like conscious control over it or thought to it. And so this is kind of a new experience for him. So I feel like even though he does come off as kind of like, why is he so much less talented than the others? I feel like talent isn't the only factor in this case. So I wanted to point that out. I found it hilarious how Ishida, when he was making his, instead of making a sphere, it made like a, oh, what would that? I don't even know. Basically, a very narrow um, barrier around him. And I like how the twins that are teaching them kind of speculate that it's probably based off of it, like some sort of personality concern with Ichigo, why not Ichigo, Ishida, why it ended up very narrow, which was one of the highlights of the episode because it's the only part that really made me laugh out loud, and I thought it was great. I did like that we got a little bit more expansion into the source of the hatred of Shinigami because it did kind of come off at the start kind of like blind, like they don't even know Ichigo, but somehow Ganju hates him and wants to fight him. And Ichigo isn't even like a real Shinigami in the sense that he went to school for it or was ever in Soul Society before or chosen from the souls of Soul Society. So, he's different than the others, essentially, is what I'm saying, but that doesn't seem to matter to Ganju. And then we kind of learn the reason for the blind hatred is because of their brother, which I think was needed exposition and detail because it helps us to understand the character's behavior a little bit more because it was kind of nonsensical at the first. Like, why are you just randomly attacking random people that you don't know just because of their job title? It seems a bit odd. And then I don't like anyway. We all know this. I've made that very clear in past episodes. She's not my favorite. I don't get her personality, and it's not a personality I personally like in anybody. But she did something weird in this episode that I just feel like I want to point out. Like she wanted to stay with for moral support because Ichigo hadn't figured it out yet when they were all going to dinner. And I think that's fair. Like that's a nice thing to do to want to be there for moral support. However, he then encourages her to go have dinner because, he doesn't actually need that moral support. And so she does go with them. And then she decides that starving herself is somehow a good idea, even though her stomach is actively and loudly growling. Not only does that weaken you for the future fights because you're not going to have the same energy or fuel that the others have had, making you a burden onto them at that time by choosing not to eat when you are clearly very hungry, but also like there's no actual reason why you have to starve yourself because somebody denied your moral support. Like I don't understand. And like it's fair maybe she was waiting to be able to eat with him, but there's no guarantee that he would be able to eat. And ultimately in the end he ended up being denied dinner because he caused damage, because he lost his concentration, because he didn't listen to Kakaku. So ultimately her gesture was entirely pointless, but also I don't get why she was making a gesture of starving herself in the first place because not only again is that unhealthy, but that means that she won't be fueled up for the fights ahead, and that then could make her a burden on the others, which didn't need to be there had she just done the logical, smart human thing and eaten her food. Like I didn't get why she wanted to starve herself. I understand wanting to give the moral support, like to stay behind for the moral support and eat later. Sure, fine, fair. But once that moral support was rejected and she was sent off to eat, I don't understand why she's starving herself and making a burden out of herself. And maybe I'm seeing it in a more negative light because I don't like the character, but I still think it did not make any logical sense and could have actual consequences making such a decision. So I stand by not enjoying that. Obviously, I do like that Ganju eventually started to kind of get over, like after Ichigo says why he's going to save Rukia. I like that he did kind of get over, not completely, obviously, but he got over it enough that he was willing to help Ichigo by teaching him his trick, by discovering that Ichigo is more of an upstanding person, by the fact that he's wanting to save Rukia not out of a personal I like her feeling, but out of a responsibility and owing of a debt sort of feeling. So overall, I liked some of the themes and interactions that we got in the episode. I also did not like certain aspects of certain characters and decisions that they made. And I did very much, just like I said on the objective list, find that it was very much a setup episode, similar to the last one as well, which is why I did give it the same score as I did the last episode. And this episode was also rated a 6 out of 10. And that brings the personal ranking for the arc so far to, in first, enter the world of the Shinigami. Second, assemble the Gotai 13. Third, 14 days before Rukia's execution. And then in fourth so far is the man who hates Shinigami. So that brings us now to our final segment, which is our series ranking so far. And our mostly objective ranking has the first arc, Agent of the Shinigami, at an 84%, and then this arc, Soul Society, the Sneak Entry arc, at 38 out of 210. On the personal side, the first Agent of the Shinigami arc got a 63%, and Soul Society, the Sneak Entry arc so far has 24 out of 210. With that, we have now rewatched and ranked Bleach Soul Society, the Sneak Entry Arc, Episode 24, Assemble the Gotai 13. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.